Washington earns a massive commitment on the offensive line.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into a special bonus edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He writes with me over at Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we're coming at you on this Sunday evening because, Lars, the first commitment of Washington's big recruiting weekend has happened. It's Dominic Harris, the three-star offensive tackle from Las Vegas. We'll talk about if there's a Vegas wave incoming. We'll get to that in a little bit, and the fact that this is a stacked offensive line class. But Lars, before we get going, I have to tell a little story, because as all the everydayers know, we're going to turn into our Monday episode and hear us talk about how, we'll see who the first commit is going to be. We already recorded that part, and then 20 minutes into the show, I looked down at my phone immediately after, and everybody can go watch tomorrow's show, and they'll see this immediately after, saying, hey, Dominic Harris is a really, really important piece of this offensive line class. You start talking, and I said, hey, I got to stop you because Dominic Harris is committed to Washington.
And it was so symbolic where we talked about it immediately afterwards, when it's just like we had talked about how he still had 3 other visits scheduled to Oregon, Arizona, Oregon, and UNLV.
UNLV, yeah.
The last one, of course, being a hometown visit. So call it last 2 visits. And between both those schools, that was kind of the point that I was about to make, where I was like, it actually tracks that Dom Harris to Washington's gaining steam, or, you could absolutely see that coming to fruition. And literally, as we're saying it comes to fruition. It's like, great. And also shout out to him for wearing the number 79 Victor Curran jersey. So that last Husky, I believe, offensive lineman to wear that number. With that being said, again, symbolic in the take where it's, again, when Victor Curran committed, it was, oh, nice, a solid 3-star out of Texas. You don't really know what you're getting. If you put Dom Harris in Texas and make it the exact same situation, I think people are looking at this in a much more positive light, which is why we're so high on him. Whether it's Vegas or whether it's wherever, this was a solid take in terms of a guy where Washington was in on him early. Michael Switzer identified that talent very early on in the process, the first actually to identify that talent. And I think that was the reason why we always thought like he made the most sense to go to Washington. But then almost because of the momentum that Michael Switzer and that Washington offensive offer created, it was, did you almost not overplay the hand, but is he going elsewhere because of all these other schools? You survived the Auburn visit, and now he's a Husky.
Yeah, that's the big thing here, where our buddy Scott Eklund did a fantastic interview for him, where that's what he said too. It was, I took the Auburn visit. I was really interested. I came up here and I was sold. And I knew I wanted to be a Husky, canceled all those other visits. And this is such an important piece for just what it means for this class in terms of now you have 3 offensive linemen in Kodi, Greene, Deong, and Dominic Harris. But it's also just, this is the perfect building block for a Big Ten offensive line, because we look at Kodi Greene's film right now, and he plays right tackle for Mater Dei, and I've seen, could he play left in the future? Why not just leave him on the right side? If he's just so solid over there, there's absolutely no problem with that. And Dominic Harris could be that, he is that prototypical left tackle from his build, from just his frame, from the way he plays, the power he plays with. He's got great feet. Just having all of that is such a critical thing for, truly for any offensive lineman. But for what he brings to this particular class, as Washington continues to move into the Big Ten and just transform both trenches, like we've talked about the defensive line for a heck of a long time now, but spending a little more time on the offensive line, which is really well addressed in the 25 class, seeing Jed Fish and now Michael Switzer pick up right where they left off at the end of 2025 is so crucial, because now, we look at some of these other offensive linemen taking a visit, Pulalaiti Primus being, a big name. And then of course, Sam Utu already took his and has a crystal ball to Washington. This offensive line class is shaping up in such a great way.
It really is. And I think it was the offensive line that Jed was talking about in the spring, when he's like, all of our offensive linemen are 6'5" and 340 pounds, Colin. It's like, the average. And we all look at each other like, I'm not sure about the 340, maybe 320, which is what I was going to say with this class. Where you look at Kodi Greene, now Dom Harris, and Deong, that's a 6'4", 6'3", 320 class average, more so on the 6'5" range, but I was going to say 6'3" just to play it safe in terms of who else they might get in this class. It's exactly what you need in the Big Ten. Big beef, big size, and like you said, whether it's left side, right side, it doesn't matter where you're. And that's, I think, the whole point in getting that thick class, no pun intended, is you have guys that can play a multitude of different positions where you can say, Kodi, stay on the right side. Dom, you can be on the left. Sam, you can be left or right. And you just go, and then Deong, you left or right either way. It's about getting that size, that projectability that you can coach and develop over the next 2-3 years.
Absolutely, because Lars, this really is shaping up to be a stacked offensive line class. And we'll get to that right after a message from our friends over at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. Now you can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKDOWNCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKDOWNCollege for half off your first year. Lars, this offensive line class is in such a good spot. We're having Deong, who's been committed since November of last year, is a really solid building block where, we talk about him more on Monday's show for all the everydayers out there. But he's such a strong, just interior guy where, I always like the first off the bus kind of guy. That's exactly what him and Dominic Harris both are in their own sense of that. But, I mentioned it a minute ago, and I feel like it's worth just diving into a little bit more, is you needed this size in the Big Ten because we looked at what the offensive line was last year. And that was one of the biggest things was they weren't big enough. They were not strong enough. They were not physical enough. And, part of that was just necessity and how that offensive line came to be after, you lose a couple guys, you lose all 5 members of the starters, a couple of them transfer, a couple of them go to the draft, you lose a bunch of backups as well. And then you can only rebuild through the spring portal. Like that's just the reality of the situation. And it's why, Jedd Fisch has been so intent on building this class from the high school ranks. And this is just that kind of guy where, I think about Justin Hilkema when he came in here now, as he's heading into his second season. I just think about guys like that where, it's the perfect offensive line of as you get into year 3, year 4, year 5 of Jedd Fisch, and it's, they're starting this former 3-star guy at left tackle. Oh, okay. Oh, wait, he's 6'8", 320. Oh, that guy's 6'8", 340. Like as you just continue to add size and add talent, it's not only is the best talent going to win out, like you and I talk about a lot, but having that talent that also just happens to be that elite size, because Dominic Harris is an elite sized offensive lineman where he's measured in at the Navy All-American Combine at 6'8", 348. That's exactly what you need in this conference.
And it also speaks to why you didn't add more than 2 guys in the transfer portal this past offseason in terms of guys that you could develop long-term, go get a redshirt freshman or sophomore in the portal and take away that guy in the 26 class. It's why Jedd wants to go through the high school ranks, and you nailed it exactly where I'm so glad I said 6'3" for the height average in terms of the offensive line, because Deong is 6'3", 340, 343 by 247 listings. And so you look at that and think you can't coach size, but you could absolutely develop it in terms of a projectable body where you look and think, is Deong a guy where you would expect him to be in the mix in 2 years? Call it 2027? Possibly.
I don't think so.
But you're more or less
3, which is fine.
Exactly, and that's exactly the point, and that's why you stagger out the class. It's why you can get a Sam Mutu, and he might be ready in 18 to 24 months, and then Deong takes over and call it right guard in year 3. That's a great situation to be in because, again, by the way, now imagine he's probably 6'4", maybe-ish, 3, I want to say 335 by the end of his year. But that's good, healthy weight who's been – maybe he gets a couple spot appearances in the first, his redshirt freshman or sophomore year to where you're playing those, not FCS schools, but the non-conference schools. And when you're looking at it saying that,
just getting him snaps no matter what. Yeah.
Because by the time you get to year 3, he's already ready to go. And I think that's the mold that Jedd sees this offensive line class playing out in, where you're getting 3 different types of guys, all of which who check the box that you need in the Big Ten.
So I don't think it's just this offensive line class. I don't think you're wrong, But I think it's every offensive line class is supposed to be this, where it's, you want to get these high-end guys who it's, if you need to play this guy right away, sure, you can find a way to do that. I know, there are a lot of people who don't necessarily agree with that, but that's just the way that college football is working nowadays, and especially with Jedd Fisch. That is just the way that he wants us to be. And I look at Dominic Harris, and he's not somebody who I believe is ready to play from year one, which is totally fine. If he plays in a couple of games, you are very, very happy with that. But he's somebody where you are more than willing to be patient with this. Where, like, let's say next year, John Mills is your starting left tackle. That's great. You're happy with that. Or maybe it's Paki Fee now, and John Mills is playing left guard. You can find a way to work Dominic Harris in the same progression that you're doing right now with John Mills, where it's, hey, we're going to start you off at guard, and then we're going to kick you out to tackle when that spot frees up. And that's okay. That's great, because you're just finding a way to get a guy like that reps as early as you possibly can, and whenever he might be ready to play. Because if it happens to be right away, again, great. You're happy with that. But if it takes, a year, 2 years, like you're saying, that's what you want along the offensive line, is you want to just be able to have the deepest rotation possible of, this big, strong, physical, athletic guy, it's gone. He goes to the draft, or he, goes down with an injury, which you never want. But if any of that happens, you have 3-4 guys ready to replace him, which is why I spent so much time talking about last year's offensive line, because you didn't have that. And now, if assuming all these guys sign with Washington, which I feel fairly confident in saying that they do as of this moment, you are absolutely on your way to having one of the deeper lines in the Big Ten, in my opinion. And Lars, Dominic Harris is one of maybe multiple players that this staff is going to get from Las Vegas. Lars, we saw the Gavin Day crystal ball from Chad Simmons from On3 rolling on Sunday morning. We have more on that on our Monday show. I want to spend some time talking about Dominic Harris's teammate, Dre Pollard, because this is a really fun corner who these guys were just together for everything over the course of the weekend, which is really cool to see, because Jedd Fisch loves to cultivate that brotherhood, that family environment. But it feels like Washington could end up pulling in 3 of the top 5 players in the state of Nevada.
That's exactly what you want, because it's a state that produces talent. You look at year in and year out, every class, there's at least 1 or 2 guys, no matter where you end up. I mean, obviously Bishop Gorman, you look at some of the other schools in the state of Nevada that are pretty well known for producing talent. But I think by proxy, it's almost in a way, it's, some people might not like this, but it's similar to Washington, where you look at, there's a couple of schools that, O'Dea, Eastside Catholic, a handful of others that you just look and think any school can go to there and you're going to get a guy. No matter whether it's year 1, 2, or 3, they're going to become a guy for you in your program. Nevada's a lot similar way, where you look and think, E.W. Clark, newer-ish in terms of producing talent in that realm, but it's a safe state to go to, where you look at and think, Washington, from whether it's Eddie Lapocio, Troy Pratano, you go down the list of guys, Roma Duzey, obviously, but no matter who you're talking about getting from that state, it's always been a state where you can find short-term guys and guys that maybe they take 2-3 years to develop, like Dre Pollard could, but still end up flourishing in that junior, senior year, and thinking, well, maybe you only got 2 full years of production, but hey, those 2 full years on the back end were very important, because we already had the guys to cover on the front end.
Well, and that's, the point we were just making about the offensive line, is when you're doing that that's the way you want to build a college roster. It's why we've seen the Ohio States, the Alabamas, the Georgias have so much success in recent years, because they recruit not only do they recruit at such a high level, but they stack these high-end talents. So it's, you bring up Georgia as an example. Jordan Davis is off to the NFL draft. Oh, hey, that just means more stats for Jalen Carter. And that's exactly what they've built at every position, which is why they have been such a powerhouse. And it's, what Chris Peterson was building at the end of his UW tenure. And it's why, one of the reasons that Kalen DeBoer was in such a good position to succeed, because you had so much talent, especially at tackle, just to bring this around to Dominic Harris before we get out of here. When you have Troy Fautanu and Roger Rosengarten just sitting there ready to be your starting tackles, and it's, that ends up being a first and a second round pick. And having guys like that year in and year out are so, so important. And, with Dre Pollard at corner, it's really nice to, if that ends up coming to fruition, it's really nice to have a guy with that kind of speed and athleticism just kind of sitting there waiting in the wings. And it's the same thing when you talk about the pure size and the strength and the power and the agility of Dominic Harris as well.
the word we're looking for, I think that we've been beating around the bush, is sustainability. It's making sure that year in, year out, no matter who ends up popping, who ends up shining, who ends up doing whatever, you have at least 2 or 3 guys that you can look at for every single position and say, whichever one of you two happens to emerge, we are more than comfortable, because whether it's the development or a freshman, no matter what, we feel that our talent evaluation, which is the one thing I think that everything in this show and in this class and this weekend specifically kind of highlights, is whether you're a 3 or 4 or a 5-star, we believe in our talent evaluations. And by the way, a few other schools do, because the guys that you had scheduled business for also believes in you.
Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all everydayers tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We got so much more fun stuff coming for you throughout the offseason, especially, bonus shows like this when guys happen to commit, even while recording a full show. So the best way to make sure you're up to date with everything we got going on is to make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. So that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you don't miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please, if it's 5-star reviews, it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Monday.